the decision to cancel the game?
I recall distinctly we showed Sony a proof of concept where we had a level that had combat with enemies. Then we had a boss arena with this giant guy where you were running kind of with the camera in front of you. And I think there was another room down in a cave with some magic thing that you had to do with mushrooms.
Well, that was our final one. That was the one, our deliverable, when it got canceled.
That was
where, I think actually when they came into the room before they even watched it, they already knew it was going to be canceled.
Well, actually, no. Honestly, I thought Sony was really magnanimous about the whole thing.
They were very nice about it. No question.
What they said specifically, and I recall this pretty vividly, was, "Hey, look, if you guys want to release this, you can. We will support you. However, we don't think that there's going to be a market for this game, but we'll support you." And that was cool. And for us, it was the right approach, because I think had any publisher come in and said, "We don't like this game. We just don't like it. We're going to cancel it," we would have fought back hard. This way, we had to kind of look inward and say, okay, well, they're telling us this, and wait, half of the team really doesn't like this game anyway, so they're right. We should do something different.
We had gone through so many re-envisionings that I think at first people really liked it. People liked the potential, but it changed so many times, and we had so many different gameplay hooks that kind of wouldn't work out. I mean, things that were just kind of a little bit out there that are pretty innovative, but just didn't work. And so we would have to, go back to the drawing board again on gameplay and rewrite so much code, and the character changed so many times. I think people just had a hard time. Every single time you would do something and then have to, a couple months later, redo the whole thing, you just lost a little bit of energy on the project. And
it was a pretty serious project and pretty kind of hardcore fantasy, almost RPG-like. And it wasn't fun. And I think when we started making Ratchet and Clank, we got back to just having fun. And that was the big difference. Somehow we painted ourselves into this corner where we were taking the game so seriously that we lost that special piece.
I remember I actually was one of the designers on the giant rock giant sequence where he was chasing the girl through this circular path. And what I really wanted to design was a giant mech chasing her, and I wanted her to be able to use a gun to shoot him, but I had to kind of invent all these things. He's this magical rock giant, and there's these things in the floor, and she can put her staff in the floor, and she can shoot this energy at him.
That segment was pretty cool, though.
It was cool. It actually turned out pretty well. I thought, do we ever get him busting through the bridges? Because I remember that was part of it, that he was going to be knocking. There's going to be tons of destruction happening, but
that's right. Yeah, there was bridges that he's breaking through, and then we also had the natives kind of running from him, which was kind of fun. But I just remember thinking that I really just wanted a giant mech and a big gun, and so that really worked well for Ratchet. I just remember working on a map for I-5, and I was making these little fine adjustments, and I kept getting this creeping feeling that this was all pointless. It was all these little minute things here and there. I was moving the enemy a little bit to the left, and the project actually got canceled that day. So that was my sixth sense kicked in. There's a lot of closed door meetings at Ted's office. I was like, something's not right.
Yeah, I have a memory of trying to fill a cave with mushrooms, and the mushrooms were so small and the cave was so big that it just became this impossible thing. And I think that's when I started getting the feeling that Brian's describing. What am I doing?
Something else that happened with that project that probably wasn't as apparent at the time was that we hit this no man's land in terms of our art style, where we were going from Spyro to something that we professed was for a mature audience, and it ended up, looking back at the videos, pretty darn cartoony still. So it had this kind of weird vibe.
Do you remember the lion that we called Lionel Richie? He looked like
the shaman.
The shaman lion. He looked like Lionel Richie. It was eerie.
Yeah, I recall building a level that was a big desert. And the high concept was in a desert, nothing can happen and there's no life. So we built this giant level with nothing happening in it. And it sort of, conceptually it made sense, but in terms of playing the game, we just hit this wall, like Ted was saying, what do you do? And how can you have just fun stuff going on in there?
That's right. And you turned into a tornado in that level, and you had to pick up these cool, armadillos and throw them through a wall.
Yeah, there was that enemy called Zass.
Yes, right.
He was like a clam that opened up with a, I don't know, it was a face or something.
Even Insomniac wasn't sure how mature it would be.
Well, I don't think we had decided. We just knew that it was going to be for an older audience because Spyro was really targeted at a young audience. I mean, our average age was probably 8, maybe even younger, in terms of the kids we knew were playing the game. Of course, a lot of parents played with their kids, too, when it came to Spyro. But we really felt the need to push older.
But looking back at everything we made, nothing would have been beyond T.
Yeah.
It was all pretty safe.
I don't think we ever talked about gore.
There's no blood, yeah.
Lessons learned from I-5 and how they applied to Ratchet.
I think the biggest thing was like what John said is there's no sense of humor. I mean, intentionally, we were trying to get away from the. I think Al in particular had realized, okay, so in Spyro we've got this kitchen sink attitude. Everything goes. We had cool stuff, but it was like here's the level with the hippie tie-dye shirt wearing guy on the skateboard, and it was like this is funny, but also none of it is really cohesive. It was just this is just entertainment. And so Al wanted a really cohesive world where the world took itself seriously. But the problem was it was just so serious that we couldn't have any fun with it. And I think that was the biggest lesson when we moved over to Ratchet. Everyone was just trying to have fun with it, like basing it on kind of the mechanics and like the gameplay we knew, but keeping our sense of humor.
I think another thing I learned about our studio is we spent a long, long time developing this idea that just kind of didn't go anywhere. And then Sony gave us about 3 months to come up with a new idea, and that's when we just pulled Ratchet out of nowhere. It feels like, and it just came together really quickly. And I think there's something about when you have to get something done when you're up against a wall. I hate to use that as a strategy to run a game studio, but we really rose to the occasion when we had a short amount of time, and we really kind of didn't when we had what seemed like forever.
I think it's human nature to be motivated by deadlines. It's something that where you know what the parameters are, when there's a finish line, it's easier to actually start running fast. I mean, maybe it's a terrible analogy. But.
Yeah, I think it's true, though. I think, oftentimes you can have too much rope to hang yourself with, too much time, and a lot of times there's tough calls that people don't want to make. It's like, wow, I can see this is a big design problem, and it's very easy if you have a lot of time just to say, I think I'm going to ignore that for now. But when you've got deadlines, you often have to make those tough calls and decide if it's going in the game or not.
Yeah, I think it's more about learning. I think now we've learned how to use time. Back then, we were just in a constant state of go. And then we had all this time. We just didn't know what to do with it. So,
I think there's a few things that we learned from I-5 that we applied to Ratchet. We originally had something where she would stick a staff in this crank and turn these bridges around, which we later used for Ratchet. We created an arena that I like to call the monk arena because it had a whole bunch of monks in it. And that was something that we later had the arenas in Ratchet. So I don't know. I think there's a few things we learned from that experience.
After Universal, Sony becomes the new publisher for Insomniac games.
This was the first game where we were working directly with them, but we had been working with Sony for years as the publisher of the Spyro games. And what had happened was Universal had sub-licensed the distribution and marketing rights to Sony, basically the publishing rights. So we had been working with the same producers for at least 3 years, probably 4 years. That's what made the decision so easy because we had a lot of respect for the folks up there, Connie, Grady, Shu, Greg Phillips, who had come down and seen the product and said, guys, we have some concerns about this. And instead, if they had been folks that we had just met, it would have been a lot harder to take them seriously. But they had been with us from the beginning of Spyro, for sure.
The studio's reaction to the cancellation.
But I remember driving home from work the day we canceled, and it felt so good. I felt so light, and like I could do anything, and this weight had just been taken away from us. And I think that made me realize that tough decisions aren't bad decisions. They're the right decision. And I think the whole studio came back to work the next day and just dove into the new project, and it was awesome.
Well, I know that I felt. I was second guessing myself for a long time because I've been one of the big proponents of this and really pushing to see, try to get it to work, figuring out, why do you not like this? Why do you not like this? Okay, let's see if we can fix that. And as a result, it became a very muddy vision for the game. But even after we decided not to do it, I kept on thinking, God, did we do the right thing? What are we going to do next? Because at that point, we hadn't, come up. Brian hasn't suggested Ratchet yet, and we were going to be back in this limbo of not having a game design. However, as you guys pointed out, it was nice coming back in and knowing that everybody or most people felt relief and like we had a fresh start and we had just kind of saved ourselves from a pretty awful next 2 years.